The history of Basques in Nevada dates back to the early immigrants who came to America to herd sheep. At one time, there were over 1 million sheep in Nevada, with the largest concentration of Basque sheep herders in the United States.
They brought the Basques to come to herd the sheep. Same thing, it was no different than it is now. We have the Mexicans now, we have the Peruvians now. 20 years ago we had the Mexicans, and before that we had the Basques. The reason is because there's nobody in America that would herd the sheep. There's no domestic people that would do that job.
One family has sustained the sheep ranching tradition for close to 100 years.
I guess historically wise, my grandfather came in 1914 to herd sheep for his brother-in-law, Diamond Valley. 1917, he was married and they bought the East Fork in the bar. And 1918, they bought the French, so they were in Garnerville and had the 2 bars and hotels there. In 1920, they say my grandfather was in a poker game, and it was the 3rd day of the game, and he was Dangberg. It was him and Dangberg, and Dangberg was trying to bluff to a queen he had showing in a poker game, and he went all in. He put up a band of sheep, and my grandfather called him on that, and my grandfather won that band of sheep with a pair of deuces in 1920, and that's the first sheep that he owned. So since 1920, we have been in the sheep business.
The change of seasons is reflected by the growth and nurturing of the sheep. The year begins with snow on the valley floor where the sheep will winter.
There's about 400 lambs in here, and they're still trying to figure out how to act like a sheep. They don't know how to do that yet. We're not feeding them any hay. They're just grazing here off these fields. You can see the grass is still pretty tall underneath the snow. They forage just fine, and we keep an eye on them. If you can see, they're nice and fat. But sometimes if it snows enough, we feed them hay to get them through the heavy snow. Pedro came first 5 years ago for us, and then his son came 2 years ago. And now this is Pedro's older brother, Martin, and he just came here December 1st. And this is his camp. This is his home, and it'll be his until he decides to not come back. You know, it's lonely. It's lonely out here by yourself. Comes to visit, brings the salt, does the little things, any little things need to be done. We tease these guys because the very first time we take them out here and leave them alone, they'll tell you, maybe they'll tell you like 20 years later, they'll tell you they cry themselves to sleep the first couple nights. But they get to where they understand how the sheep work and stuff, and so then it becomes a lot easier.
The sheep head for the salt, which is brought in to supplement their diet. They have a natural craving for the salt and consume it eagerly.
We do have coyote issues here, but we have the one guard dog. You know, he keeps an eye on things, and they're fine. They're his dogs now. They won't do anything for me. They won't work for me, but they'll work for him. Be a good year this year.
Soon, the sheep are moved to the home ranch, where they will lose their winter coats.
We come into our home ranch, we shear right before lambing time, and then So we'll shear in the middle towards the end of February, and then we go straight into lambing. And that's all based on economics. You know, when you come into the ranch, you're going to have to start feeding hay, and feeding hay is expensive. So we don't want to feed hay a day longer than we have to. Today is our first day of shearing. We're shearing the ewe lambs today. Tomorrow we'll shear the fine wool. Well, a lot of guys, they don't really need the harness. They do it more as this. It's just a safety mechanism more than anything. But if they use their legs right and stuff, they don't need the harness. These guys make it look easy. They can shear a sheep in 2 minutes. It takes me 2 hours. Shearing, it's one piece of wool there. You can see when they put it up there on the table, it's like a nice little rug, all in one piece. Well, we skirt the wool and we take off any bad pieces that are still left on the fleece when we skirt it. Any short pieces of wool or bad pieces of wool or skin flicks or anything, and then we go ahead and sack it up in the press. And the press is designed, we put about 450 pounds of wool in each sack. The tighter we can make it, the better it is, because they have to be, you know, it costs money, shipping costs money. Tomorrow we'll shear the fine wool. The wool tomorrow will be 18 to 20 micron wool. We'll shear all them, and then after that we'll shear the 20 to 22 micron wool. And so we shear them according to the quality of the wool. Well, we'll shear 2,600 sheep plus our rams, 2,700 sheep altogether.
The cycle of life begins again with spring lambing.
We shear right before lambing time, and we had our first live lambs were born, 2 days after we finished shearing. So the month of March is a very busy month. It's labor intensive. We start lambing. We're lambing about 100 a day right now. We try to leave them alone as long as we can. We try not to interfere with them. You know, we'll watch them and we'll see that sheep's starting to have trouble. We'll leave them alone for another 45 minutes. So we'll come back and check in a half hour and maybe in an hour. But after an hour, maybe if there's still problems there, we'll do a little more investigation into it. To see if the feet are turned around or if it's coming backwards or something, then we'll get involved. Otherwise, we try not to do that. So then, you know that sometimes these sheep, these yearlings that have never had a lamb before, don't know how to act, and sometimes they'll have a lamb and they'll walk away and go feed, or sometimes an old ewe that has a lamb and doesn't have the milk to raise that lamb might walk away from that lamb too. And again, that's why we want somebody there to make sure those lamb, that doesn't happen. And when that happens, we can make sure we can get the ewe back with that lamb and get them mothered up. And then you have the other ewes. You'll have what, you know, these mothers, these sheep that are very good mothers, and they're just about ready to lamb. They know they're going to drop a lamb in the next couple hours. They'll start robbing lambs. So they'll go over there and try to claim someone else's lamb. Some sheep can stay in a barn 4 or 5 days. Some sheep come out the very next day. If the lamb mothers up fine, if the lamb is suckled, the sheep has milk and the lamb is suckled, and we'll kick them out. There's no reason to keep them in there. If the lamb hasn't suckled and needs assistant suckling, so we'll help them and we'll leave them in there maybe another day. If the sheep doesn't have milk, maybe we have to take that lamb and suckle it off a big titter somewhere else and bring it back, and hopefully that sheep will come into its milk in the next 24 hours. Sheep has a big tit that's so swollen full of milk that it's too big for the lamb to get its mouth around it. We'll have to suckle that tit down. We'll have to milk that tit down so it gets smaller, that it actually gets to a, we'll have to get the milk out of it so that it's small enough that a lamb can actually suckle it. So there's a lot of different things that'll determine whether if everything goes well, which is, you know, 80% of the time, the sheep spend a day in there and they come out. Everything leaves the barn with a number on it. Left side brands are singles, right side brands are twins. Probably 90% of all the herders in the United States today, H2A workers, come from Peru. I'm lucky that I still have Mexicans, a group of Mexicans that come. They're all related. They're brothers and sons and uncles. They're all related. They're a great bunch of guys. They work really well. It's hard to get people to do this job. You know, it's a 24-hour job right now, the month of March.
Talk about it again.
Well, we try not to stay on the ranch any longer than we have to. We're feeding hay here at $200 a ton. You know, we're feeding $1,000 of hay every day here. So it's every day we spend here, it's tough on trying to make this whole business work. As the sheep get older and stuff and their feeds change and stuff, sometimes their tail get full of crap, and then you have flies and infections and stuff. So we cut the tails for sanitary purposes, and at the same time we will castrate the male lambs so that when we're out in the hills, you know, we don't sell the lambs coming into the corrals until the end of September, and by August some of these male lambs would be mature that did start to breed. So we don't want that happening out there. So we castrate and cut the tails for sanitary purposes.
When are you going to...
When we cut the tails off and we castrate the lamb, a ewe lamb, we'll put an ear tag on it, and it has a color on it, so we can tell just by looking at the sheep from a distance the age of that sheep. Normally you'd have to mouth it out, you'd have to count its teeth, and by counting its teeth up to 4 years old, you can tell how old a sheep is. Our first bunch will leave here. We're looking, we'll take a band out of here, maybe the 5th or 6th of April, and go into the hills with them. Well, one band will haul out of here. We're looking at the 5th or 6th. We'll haul out of here. We'll actually haul out of here into Carson City because we do a fuels management project for them in Carson City. And then the second band will probably stay here, and somewhere around the 15th, give or take, we'll start trailing out of here. And we have an April-May permit with the Indians, and we'll go on to their land for April and May, and then work up the hills from there. We'll be bringing the sheep through the town of Dayton. That's our home place there, and we'll cross right through downtown Dayton to cross the bridge, and we are the last sheep outfit to do that. At one time there was 20,000 plus sheep cross that trail every year through the town of Dayton to cross the bridge to get on the other side of the Carson River, and we are the last band of sheep that will do that anymore.
In June, the sheep travel to the high meadows, where they graze among the aspens and creeks throughout the summer.
This used to be the sheep camp. This is where the herder stayed in the summer, and as you look around, look at all the view from here. He could survey the sheep, and so it was a perfect place to spend the summer here. And that's why this area, every tree is carved, sometimes by 2, 3, even 4 carvers. There were 3 brother Bordas that came from Argentina, and they were here in the early 1900s, 19-teens actually. One was Ramon, who carved the most. Sometimes he calls himself Ramon, sometimes he calls himself in Basque Ramon. So here's another Ramon Borda. Borda and Ramon, and 1914. So he was here 2 years in a row, 14 and 15. Here's another Ramon Borda, beautiful, with his own self-portrait. And here he is. This is Ramon, who was one-armed, and we see this carved in this area more than once, several times. This is Ramon's other brother, Guilen. Here is the G-U-I-L-E-N. And the last name, very clearly written, Borda. And here's the date, 1915. Here is him, right here. A big guy with a big nose, and here's another woman looking at this woman that has no arms, of course. But this lady looks pretty much like a lady. Well, now we are on the north side of Monitor Pass, and we found the number 3, the third brother, Borda brother, B-A-T-I-T-A, Batita, which in Basque is like Baptist. He carved his name twice because he was here in 1916 and 1917.
It's a lonely life, you know. These guys are still, even though they have cell phones and have the radios and everything else, they're still up there by themselves for, 6, 7 days, 1 day out of the week that, the camp tender comes to see them and spends a couple hours with them. But when they're in the high country, it's pretty darn lonely. We've been in this country since 1945. We've been running on this forest permit here. It's a beautiful country, 8,800 feet. Nice high altitude for this time of year, August 13th. Very happy with the lambs right now. We'll ship the lambs in another 40 days from now, and so maybe we'll put on another 20 pounds. And so lambs look good. Lambs look very good for August 13th. I'm very happy with them.
As the aspens begin to turn color, it's a sign that fall has arrived in the high country.
Well, next week we're going to bring another band of sheep in here together with this other band we have here now. So there'll be about lambs and sheep together. There'll be about 3,200, and it's for us. It's the only time. It's the one day out of the year that we bring everything together like that, the day before shipping. Well, we're watering down these krills because there's like 6 inches of dust in them. So it would be a very miserable day tomorrow trying to work sheep here if we didn't water these corrals down. This is my favorite day of the whole year. It's the only time in the whole year you'll see 3,200 sheep and lambs all together like that. So it's an exciting time for me. This is my Christmas today. Each guy's got 2 dogs plus a guard dog, and they're his, and they only mind him. A guy doesn't have to do much walking if he's got a good dog. Yeah, the big Pyrenees dogs. They're right here in the middle of the sheep all the time because that's where they live. They're a lifesaver. Fuel has really hurt us. The cost of fuel has hurt the rancher more than anything. He's got to put diesel in that truck to haul the lambs. The price of fuel has really, really hurt the farmer and the ranchers.
I check within season triggers and end of season utilization, as well as range readiness at the beginning of the growing season. So I make sure that the range is ready for sheep, and also kind of check throughout the summer and make sure that we have our proper use criteria and that he's following his grazing permit and his annual operating instructions.
Hut, hut. Hut. Hut, hut, hut. Hut, hut. At 90 cents you can't make money.
No.
It costs too much food, and food is very expensive now, and the gasoline.
Yeah. Come on, baby. I know Borda's family, and I help a little bit Borda's, not too much, but a little bit. I like a sheep. I got a sheep in my house anyway.
Yeah, all the sheep have ear tags in them, so it's easy to identify the sheep coming down. Plus, they're bigger. But all the sheep have an ear tag, and so we sort out the sheep. It's easy to pull them out. We'll keep the sheep here for another 10 days, 12 days. You take the lambs off, the sheep aren't lactating anymore. The sheep eat very little compared to what they would otherwise.
Although sheep can still be seen grazing in Nevada's mountains and deserts, what does the future hold for the family rancher?
Everything's changed in that, you know, we were, the rancher was was the king, you know. He didn't have to really account to too many people as far as running sheep in the hills and stuff. And now we have to, you know, you got the environmentalists you have to account to. You have the forest rangers have standards now. You know, in '35 there were no standards. It's a tough business now. You got to be born into it, and you got to like it. You got to love it to want to do it. This is our 100th year in the sheep business, and that's kind of exciting for us.